Time passed by, and eventually, the dynasty's army began to prepare to depart. All the soldiers had lined up at the north gate of the Heavenly Horse Temple, awaiting only the command to set off. There were millions of followers of the faith, and even the high priest himself had personally seen off the king's procession. The initial encounter between the two had been rather unpleasant. However, during their time here, Chu Tai-Kiem had become more at ease. He promised to speak favorably to the emperor upon his return, especially about the Heavenly Horse Temple. After expressing sincere gratitude, Chu Tai-Kiem also paid attention to the reply letter from the high priest to the court, although its contents were unknown. But surely, if the priest agreed, it would remain confident in the king's eyes. Thus, Chu Tai-Kiem tried to inquire about it with great anticipation. However, Heavenly Pham only responded that the signing ceremony would take place at the Union of Forces, and he would send someone in his place. This left Chu Tai-Kiem furrowing his brows, perhaps feeling overly disappointed due to his high hopes. The general and his subordinates shared the same feeling as the king. During their stay here, they had been treated quite courteously and had assumed that the high priest himself would appear, almost as if he would accept the invitation to the signing ceremony. Surely, this must have been the plan the high priest had for his subordinates. In the end, they had to leave without achieving what they wanted. The king's procession also withdrew without looking back, seemingly equally disappointed. Chu Tai-Kiem's mood plummeted right after receiving the high priest's response. Perhaps he no longer cares much about sending or receiving letters to aid his father. One thing was for sure, Chu Tai-Kiem would never want to face those from the Devil Sect after knowing the high priest's intentions. Just looking at the reply letter, he hastily threw it away as if trying to dispel anger towards those despicable people who made the king wait. What on earth was happening? The king seemed eager to vent his feelings, but he couldn't do anything. The imperial envoy had personally extended the invitation, so they should have known their place and come. Perhaps all the king could do now was to mutter to himself and blame his own inadequate abilities. After this encounter, the king must have received so much shame. Of course, the one responsible for causing such shame was none other than Heavenly Pham. Just as the mention of the protagonist arose, he suddenly appeared on horseback without any imperial guards noticing. Chu Tai-Kiem hastily inquired about the reason, but the protagonist remained silent. Despite his best efforts, there seemed to be an immense energy causing this discomfort. Heavenly Pham began to smirk and transmitted to the king that it seemed he anticipated him. The king's expression turned sour, unable to do anything. To prove this point, Chu Tai-Kiem shook his head as if to deny it. The protagonist continues to transmit as if demanding the king's compliance, receiving reluctant nods in return. It was unbelievable. The high priest of the Heavenly Horse Temple had bid farewell from the North Gate, yet here he was on horseback throughout the journey. After witnessing the king's sincerity, Heavenly Pham willingly lowered his authority. Chu Tai-Kiem witnessed firsthand the power of the Grand High Priest of the Heavenly Horse Temple. Heavenly Pham was indeed a monstrous figure, capable of wiping out the entire royal army if he wished. At this moment, the king could only adapt and respond according to the circumstances. The king felt rather unfortunate because despite his noble status, he could potentially be the prince of the great Ming Empire in the future. However, upon arriving at the Devil Sect, he truly understood the immense power of this force. Both of them communicate telepathically, and once again, Chu Tai-Kiem expressed surprise, not expecting that the high priest had been on the carriage since he first opened this person's martial arts skills. It seemed like this person had truly reached the highest level. However, this wasn't entirely accurate. From the beginning, the protagonist had infiltrated the carriage before the dynasty's army prepared to depart. As for the person standing at the main gate to the north, that was a substitute who had disguised himself as the high priest of the Heavenly Horse Temple. The real reason Heavenly Pham was on this horse carriage was to accompany the king. Upon hearing this, Chu Tai-Kiem was truly shocked, believing that the protagonist had heard his murmured curses. Initially, the king had only felt melancholic when the high priest couldn't attend the treaty signing ceremony. Fortunately, it turned out that the king thought His Highness despised him. Almost, he would have hated His Highness back. Clearly, Chu Tai-Kiem had berated the high priest of the Heavenly Horse Temple terribly. Yet the other party remained silent. Please forgive me for presumptuously getting on the horse and catching your highness off guard. I will make amends fittingly, Chu Tai-Kiem apologized. However, it needed to be pointed out that Heavenly Fam's act of climbing onto the carriage was quite rude. Hence, the protagonist didn't waste any more time and straightaway addressed the matter, not as a request for assistance, but rather as a thinly veiled threat. Chu Tai Kiem fell silent, feeling only fear and dread towards this individual. Truly, this person was terrifying. However, the words of the royal family were like celestial commands. One couldn't casually make deals with him. After seeing the king's response, which implied a willingness to help, Heavenly Fam was quite surprised and reminded himself that even though it was the royal family, sweet words might be more effective in enticing cooperation. Heavenly Fam needed the assistance of this individual because the 6 martial sects will also participate in the treaty signing. He stated a quite legitimate reason because the person named Duck An was a former spy for those forces. Although it wasn't clear what they discussed, the protagonist briefly explained the context of the appearance of the 6 martial sects in the martial arts world and the events that had occurred at the Heavenly Horse Temple for the king to hear. Of course, it includes the use of toxic bugs to prevent information leakage from those forces. Chu Tai Kiem found it hard to believe because the idea of implanting insects into the body just to prevent information leakage seemed extreme, albeit effective. However, it appears to be a very extremist approach. In reality, aside from the aforementioned Duck An, among the soldiers accompanying this entourage, there might be a few who were also spies for the 6 martial sects. If what the high priest said was true, shouldn't they apprehend them immediately? Heavenly Fam shook his head, suggesting that it wasn't the right time to act because the influence of those forces had already taken root within the palace. This is indeed my true purpose, and being on this horse carriage is to personally identify and erase the entire root of the 6 martial sects that have embedded their people into the martial world. If there are any connections to the palace, things will be quite complicated. That's why I want to eliminate them before matters worsen. I know it's like that, but Chu Tai Kiem seems quite hesitant, unsure of how to respond. Then the protagonist makes a rather clever suggestion. They don't want to elevate their status and become the crown prince or anything. Chu Tai Kiem is truly shocked because these desires were mentioned by him and his advisors just yesterday. Yet General Nam used his kit to block their conversation from being overheard. Today, the high priest can articulate the situation so easily. Just by observing his expression, one can understand the extent of his desire for the throne of the great Ming Empire. So, Heavenly Fam takes the initiative to sweet talk, promising that if they capture those lurking within the palace, he will hand them over to the king to receive great recognition. Anyway, we only want to eliminate them, not to gain favor with the emperor. Chu Tai Kiem becomes more hesitant because there's only 1 month left until the Dragon Boat Festival. If they achieve success before then, perhaps they can surpass their senior brothers and attain the position of the crown prince. Although it's a good thing, the king needs to ask what will happen if he refuses. Of course, Heavenly Fam has his preparations and only requests the other party to imagine how that outcome would be. Chu Tai Kiem starts to feel a chill down his spine after hearing that. It means that Heavenly Fam will still proceed with his plans regardless of the king's refusal. So, eventually, the young king agreed to join hands with the high priest of the Heavenly Horse Temple. Afterward, they both relaxed together on the carriage, discussing countless topics quickly. The entourage reached Kaifeng, the capital of the Great Ming Empire. This city was a bustling metropolis in central Vietnam with a population of about 500,000, located northeast of Ta Han Nam Citadel. Its vast expanse required about 2 hours of horseback riding from the suburbs to the city center. In the heart of the city stands the Dragon Palace, constructed with countless golden roofs symbolizing the opulence and power of the royal court. Chu Tai Kiem's army had already passed through the southern gate of the Dragon Palace. Now all the soldiers of the dynasty lined up along the route to welcome the return of the king. As soon as he stepped down from the carriage and set foot in his territory, Chu Tai Kiem felt a sense of relief. He finally sobbed deeply, grateful that they had reached the palace. The 7 days prior had indeed felt like hell. Why hadn't he said a word during those 7 days of eating and sleeping together? That stoic demeanor of him was exhausting. Thinking so, Chu Tai Kiem also touched at the bodyguard standing behind General Nam for a long time. Heavenly Fam had disguised himself as Lai Han, a highly trusted bodyguard of the general. He was currently in the southern part of the Devil Sect. However, even his chief strategist couldn't detect this. It was truly miraculous. but not surprising, as the protagonist had used nanotechnology to mimic his voice. After stabilizing his bioenergy, General Nam also ordered everyone to return to headquarters, leaving only 10 people to escort the king. It was fortunate that the protagonist accompanied the king to the palace to report on this journey. As for Chu Tai Kim, both of them were now on the same boat, so there was no more worry as they ventured further inside. The protagonist was amazed by the lavish arrangement in this place. The Heavenly Horse Temple was beautiful, but it couldn't compare to the magnificent palace that his eyes were currently holding. All the members of the entourage accompanying the king continued to move forward. And at this moment, General Nam also noticed there were countless officials welcoming them, with over 30 court eunuchs from Thedong Slong standing in neat rows, displaying disciplined behavior. Even with just a cursory glance, it was evident that they were high-ranking officials. This reminded Heavenly Pham of the old head eunuch. What's more, all the individuals in front seemed to be skilled martial artists, which was astonishing given their status as eunuchs. This leads the protagonist to pay closer attention to a particular figure. Their demeanor resembles that of the chief eunuch. He believed this person was likely the leader among them, judging by their strength. Perhaps they had reached the pinnacle of martial arts mastery. In the previous meeting, Heavenly Pham had negotiated with the king about the infiltration of spies from the Kudel Lup Vomon sect. However, upon entering this place, they encountered numerous individuals from Thedong Xuang, who bore a striking resemblance to the old head eunuch. Not only that, but there was also an exceptionally unique character who caught the attention of the high priest of the Heavenly Horse Temple. This person seemed to be the leader of the eunuchs working in Thedong Xuang of the Great Ming Empire, which was ruled by 4 extremely powerful organizations appointed by the emperor. All of them, including East Workshop, West Workshop, Inner City Workshop, and the Imperial Guard, or commonly known as the Kamwai Guards, are organizations managed by court officials. Unlike regular officials, they have the authority to arrest, detain, and even make immediate death sentences with their initial legal power. Initially, those from East Workshop worked under the guidance of the Kamwai Guards. However, after completing many tasks, their numbers increased, and eventually, they were sanctioned as a separate organization. All of this is thanks to the good work performance of these court officials and the support from the emperor. Therefore, the position of the Kamwai Guards is now shaky, and it can be said that both of these powers don't like each other. Heavenly Pham could clearly sense the expressions and attitudes of General Nam standing beside him. He showed disgust and disdain for those genders that were unclear, not hiding whose it was open. One court official, as described, resembles the old chief of espionage. Now, they have moved forward and greeted Chu Tai Kim. This person is the Governor-General of East Workshop, Ngai Thaitan Nam. The main character carefully observed this person, perhaps suspecting that he might be a spy for the 6 martial arts sect. Of course, neither the Holy King nor his subordinates particularly liked him. The leader of the Heavenly Devil sect sensed a strange aura different from the martial arts he knew. He had thought that apart from the Kamwai Guards, there weren't many martial artists within the palace. However, each of the ant nest palaces had hundreds of them. So the search will be very time-consuming. You've worked hard to come all the way from the 10,000 Great Mountains, Chu Tai Kim remarked, somewhat surprised by the question and deliberately avoiding eye contact, as if uninterested. Despite being weary of those vile demons, this person still looks very dignified. The prince was becoming increasingly anxious after the description of those living in the demon sect, as they couldn't know that the leader of the great heavenly demon sect was standing right in front of them. The main character furrowed his brows. But the story couldn't stop there, as the general from East Workshop remembered those from East Workshop that he would personally escort the Holy King back. Without the king's order, those below the 4th rank were not allowed to enter the Keaton Palace. This was crucial, and besides the South March Palace, no one else was allowed to enter. The Grand Chancellor only hinted that only those with influential positions were allowed here. Naturally, the general couldn't hide his dissatisfaction. Although he didn't wish for it, he also didn't dare to speak up, only requesting everyone to return to their base as tasks were being assigned here. Suddenly, the voice of the 5th rank officially rang out, suggesting that the South March Palace could accompany them. Perhaps he was nearing his limit, and if allowed, he might draw his sword and behead this person. Witnessing this scene, Chu Tai-Kiam became gentler as the official's behavior seemed a bit too regal for a servant of the emperor. The king had ordered the South March Palace and others to accompany them. Don't you understand that arguing with those in the royal family is extremely complicated? Thus, the fifth-rank official bowed and apologized. However, a smirk still lingered on his lips. Since the mention of the prince's position, various factions had emerged. Among them, the people of Dongxiang strongly supported the Grand Prince, so they were relatively rampant, causing internal turmoil within the Great Ming Empire. All of this chaos was simply because of those corrupt officials. While fuming over this matter, the Holy King also transmitted his voice to inquire about the situation regarding the heavenly sect leader, advising not to worry and promising that they will meet again in the holy sanctuary at the hour of the dog. Chu Tai-Kiam also didn't know what to do next because he knew that this person would eventually uncover the truth. Shortly after, all the members of the Kambai guards returned to the base. However, they all expressed disdain towards those corrupt officials for their disrespectful actions. Even Thien Pham couldn't stand them because they had enhanced his plans. Judging from the expressions of the soldiers, they must have been accustomed to such confrontations. The senior medical officer mentioned that there were up to 5 suspected spies in the palace, believed to be from the Extreme Blade and 6 martial sects. Among them, there were also 2 members of the Kamwai Guards because during their time in the Heavenly Devil sect, they had been continuously investigating around the sect leader and had attracted attention to a target. However, his power only ranks first in martial arts. Although not high, it is clear that he is still hiding something when arriving at the designated location according to the patrol point. Even the former team leader has requested a halt and spoke up. Everyone has worked hard. While the Holy Guardian Nam Chen Fu has ordered that you do not need to stand guard for 4 days. Take advantage and rest. The soldiers were very excited at the unexpected good news as they were not assigned any special tasks. Their task is to stand guard at the residence, which feels like a mundane vacation, and they feel quite satisfied. Because they don't have to bother thinking about how to avoid work hours now. Just observe the name of the chaotic guard, and that's it. When everyone was in their guard positions, the suspicious name also approached the protagonist and said that we still have places to go. These words made him slightly attentive because it was certain that Lai Han and Luan Bako had some acquaintance before. Unexpectedly, such a twist occurred in infiltrating the royal court. However, regardless, the protagonist couldn't afford to reveal his identity because things would become more complicated if someone knew that the sect leader of the celestial demon cult was here. Luan Bako led him along, and he seemed quite familiar with this path as they passed through each gate without any difficulty. On the contrary, all the guards bowed respectfully, which only confirmed even more clearly that Luan Bako and Lai Han were both spies. Another small detail caught the protagonist's attention because this person seemed entirely willing to take detours, intentionally diverting the guards' attention. After they roamed around, it was already late, and few people were around, so the protagonist and Luan Bako made it to the martial training ground. As per their usual habits, he casually grabbed a black cloak for himself and tossed one to the protagonist as if they did this regularly. Let's sneak into the 4th warehouse quietly, so put on the cloak and follow me. After this was done, their demeanor completely differed from other Imperial guards. Wherever Luan Bako went, the protagonist followed closely behind. The path was so familiar that it didn't raise any suspicions from the guards as they entered the mortal warehouse. Calculating, this was probably where all the rice was stored, enough to feed everyone in the royal court for a year. I could also feel the martial aura of those training here. If there were any secret operatives within the court, they were likely of the highest martial caliber. Perhaps before coming to the court, the sect leader of the celestial demon cult hadn't expected to investigate and find leads so quickly. They continued moving, and upon reaching the last door inside the warehouse, it swung open as they stepped in. The protagonist was taken aback by the spacious interior, filled with dozens of people dressed in black cloaks. They were murmuring to each other about something that he couldn't quite catch from afar. At the far end, a figure seated atop bags of rice seems to be the leader of this group. As the sect leader of the celestial demon cult scrutinized more carefully, Luan Bako suddenly stepped forward and loudly exclaimed. It seemed like he had indeed noticed Lai Han's disappearance, so now he spoke directly. Tell me, what have you done? Mortal. The protagonist was quite puzzled. so he stepped back towards the leader and reminded others to surround him before the loud shout erupted. About 10 people blocked the exit of the warehouse, and dozens more encircled the protagonist in an unbelievable manner. Their detection skills were exceptional, evident from how few could discern the leader's disguise. If things had escalated to this point, it was unlikely to stop here. Luan Bakho continued to shout, pointing out the one following him as the spy. However, the protagonist, still not grasping the situation fully, tried to play his role and asked, "What is your intention? Lai Han and I are allies. He never spoke politely to me, and I led him here without any objections or questions. So, who are you exactly?" The protagonist sobbed, shaking his head in exasperation, because the plan he had conceived as foolproof was now falling apart. Deceiving a familiar face, even with a perfect disguise and voice modulation, proved challenging. The leader stood up, directing his gaze towards Luan Bakho, asking if it was indeed a spy. Once confirmed by his subordinates, his smile turned dangerous, deliberately shifting his attention to the protagonist. It was indeed a foolish move for someone to step into the lion's den like this without revealing their true identity. The leader, standing atop the bags of rice, rose from his seat and, hearing the firm assertion from his subordinate, affirmed that Lai Han was indeed the imposter. Luan Bakho not only spoke but also appeared quite certain. Thus, he revealed a sinister smile, exposing his true cunning nature, labeling the imposter as foolish and despicable for daring to infiltrate like this. Despite facing formidable forces before, the protagonist couldn't act now as he needed to gauge their true strength. The leader ordered the ones behind to encircle, or rather, the undercover operatives to surround the spy. He ordered not to kill but to apprehend the fake Lai Han, instructing him to kneel before them. At that moment, the three men behind rushed towards the protagonist, thinking he was just an ordinary person they could easily capture to appease their leader. Perhaps they were a bit arrogant and disdainful. However, in the scenes that followed, you would witness the Grand Master of the Celestial Demon Sect showing no fear but rather calmly flicking his hand. It was a seemingly gentle action, yet enough to make those men feel the impending danger. After Thien Pham did that, a powerful force was generated, pushing back the three men simultaneously. They flew backward and crashed onto the floor, seemingly injured to the point where they couldn't stand up. As a result, Luan Bakho and the others couldn't conceal their astonishment. Not just the subordinates but even the leader himself showed a more hesitant expression than ever before. He tried to stay calm and look towards the imposter Lai Han more cautiously. In his mind, there were inevitably thoughts about the true identity of that person. They thought he was just a regular spy, but they were mistaken. It seemed he was not an ordinary person. The question lingered. Who was he really? They assumed he was just an ordinary spy, but it seemed they were wrong. He was not your average person. Now they needed to personally handle him to ascertain his true intentions. Some weaker individuals understood immediately who the person drawing the sword was. He was the strongest guard of the Great Tang, so it was worth waiting for his display of prowess. After informing the leader, who was sitting cross-legged on the bags of rice, his body also disappeared quickly, transitioning to those cold, piercing eyes. The sound of the sword being drawn echoed, its blade as thin as a strand of hair, swiftly striking. He managed to land a hit, but it seemed the situation didn't end there. This guard understood that he only needed to strike the opponent's phantom, just the afterimage. While pondering this, suddenly he felt the chilling sensation right at his spine. Thien Pham had already exposed himself before him, his voice dangerously cold, praising his opponent's skill. Strangely, though, the hand gripping the weapon tightly was now in the palm of his hand. Only at this moment did the guard feel the numbing pain coursing straight into his heart, accompanied by hot spurts of blood. All of this was evident in the panicked eyes of the leader sitting atop the bags of rice. "What are you waiting for? Kill him!" When the order was given, his subordinate hesitated momentarily before swiftly drawing the sword from his belt and charging forward. The men began to advance towards Thien Pham without any fear, risking their lives. At this point, the secrecy of the warehouse was no longer maintained. Thien Pham remained unchanged, but he merely tossed aside the arm of the guard and waited for the opportunity moment. As they prepared for a battle with the protagonist, something unexpected happened. While they were still standing, the leader of the demon sect directed his hand towards those approaching. Their bodies suddenly pressed down towards the ground, unable to move due to some invisible force or something beyond imagination. The strength could be seen by the marks on the ground. Thin Pham didn't stop there, for he cared little for these insignificant pawns. With his superior martial skills, how could they even touch a hair on the head of the Grand Master of the Celestial Demon Sect? Their limbs couldn't move, and their bodies were under his control. With a simple gesture, he managed to subdue everyone in the warehouse. The leader at the forefront was shaken to his core as he was pushed back to his bones, unable to retreat. Many questions raced through his mind. What was happening here? This person was not just an ordinary martial artist. Behind the guard, who was bleeding from his severed arm, he took a daring action, still wielding his sword with one hand. He generated a sharp aura and stealthily stabbed towards Thin Pham to see if it would yield better results. Perhaps he didn't know the Celestial Demon Sect leader's penchant for severing limbs, as once again, his remaining arm was torn off. This time, not only did he lose his hands, but his head also fell off, and nobody knew when. The 100 warlords and their leader are now terrified because they never thought that Stranger could be so powerful. Their dominance is completely overwhelmed, easily controlling the Easy Gordians. Moreover, their methods are brutal and chillingly ruthless. Thin Pham gently extended his left hand, intending to grasp something, causing the two men to startle involuntarily. The leader in the room understood the situation and attempted to react, but he struggled as if lagging a beat, then futilely attempted to flee, trying to break free from the energy source. However, the power discrepancy was immense, akin to the difference between heaven and earth. Immediately, he found himself firmly grasped within the strong hand of Thin Pham, the leader of the Celestial Demon Sect, who easily lifted the feeble body despite its continuous resistance. Even if your people know I am a spy, what can you do? The leader of the spy group belongs to the realm of martial arts sneezed, proud of his position. Thin Pham noticed the emblem revealed on his hat, confirming he was indeed from the East. It was evident that this individual possessed an abnormal inner power, closer to dark energy, with a completely different internal martial arts technique from the extreme Tao 6 martial arts. This peculiarity prompted the Celestial Demon Sect leader to intentionally mention the extreme Tao 6 martial arts, but the leader only struggled to breathe, seemingly unaware of what was being said. Observing the expression, Thin Pham understood that he dared not lie, as death loomed near. However, he also sensed the leader's astonishment, considering it an unusual discovery not to be overlooked. Naturally, the protagonist turned towards the 100 warlords, who were witnessing the overwhelming power. The leader's mouth began to understand that their forces had been subdued, but all those lying unconscious on the ground had lost consciousness entirely. Furthermore, upon realizing that all the masters of Dong Xuan were no different from ordinary people, it was already too late. Thin Pham ignored the official and continued to drag Bok Luanho back to his place for interrogation. With just a gentle grasp, his body was lifted, accompanied by a strong, irresistible force. Bok Luanho, without resistance, was pulled along and then collapsed, kneeling before the Celestial Demon Sect leader. Without delay, Thin Pham asked the question, why was the Cam Live associating intimately with those from Dong Xuan? Although a seemingly simple question, Bok Luanho struggled to devise an answer. It was rather ironic. Do you wish to uphold the honor of a spy? Even if the opponent is powerful and overwhelming, if he speaks, it implies betrayal, and suicide seems like a better choice because one cannot scream. Bok Luanho began shedding tears, gradually forgetting his affiliation with the organization. Thin Pham paid no heed and continued with his inquiry. If you don't speak, what will happen to your remaining hand? You understand that, right? Bok Luanho nodded in understanding, strengthening the complexity of human nature. Just a moment ago, he still attempted to maintain integrity and choose death, but after enduring unbearable pain and suffering, he will collapse entirely. The invisible source of energy disappeared from his mouth. Bok Luanho, unable to contain himself, confessed to being a spy originating from Dong Xuan. Despite Thin Pham's assertion that he was a government official, the man denied it, claiming that he had not only trained in Dong Xuan, but was not affiliated with it anymore. Thin Pham's disappointed gaze indicates the ineffectiveness of his assumption that everyone in the warehouse was a spy from the extreme Tao 6 martial arts. He never imagined they were spies from Dong instead. While contemplating this, the protagonist continued to inquire why they were assigned to the Royal Special Envoy Corps. Was it perhaps for the assassination of the Holy King? The uncertain official overheard and vaguely understood. It was highly likely that the person suppressing him was indeed one of the Holy King's men, Chu Tai Kim. Bak Luan-ho didn't dwell on it much, as he was simply stating the truth. He had been tasked with monitoring the Holy King, fulfilling royal decrees, and establishing secret agreements with the leader of the Devil Sect. Without deceit, he was certain he was a spy from Dong Shuang, not from the extreme Dao 6 martial arts. Perhaps all of them were spies invited to keep an eye on Chu Tai Kim. Thien Pham needed no further questions. He understood that Dong Shuang wanted to interfere with preventing the Holy King from crowning the prince. After Bak Luan-ho finished speaking, he pleaded for mercy, promised never to interfere with the prince's coronation again. Clearly, when faced with the threat of death, everyone will choose the safest path of retreat. This realization only deepened the frown on the official's face, as he thought Dong Shuang hadn't properly trained him. Thien Pham had disguised himself as a spy to find real spies, but he hadn't expected to come across such worthless individuals, which he considered a waste of time. However, the words that followed from the celestial demon sect leader were not what Bak Luan-ho had hoped for, because the protagonist had never promised to spare him. Thus, all that had been said was unsatisfactory, and tears streamed down Bak Luan-ho's face as if he understood the outcome. What happened next? Bak Luan-ho tried to explain, but his neck twisted to one side, and he died instantly. In the previous episode, the leader of the great heavenly demon cult had disguised himself as a royal guard and quickly joined the secret meeting of spies within the palace. Thien Pham was discovered because he didn't know the relationship between the official and Bak Luan-ho. However, it didn't matter much because, fortunately, those people weren't associated with the extreme Dao 6 martial arts. Thien Pham found it quite time-consuming, so he quickly disposed of Bak Luan-ho after he revealed some irrelevant information. As Thien Pham lifted the official's face cover, revealing a heavily made-up face, confusion clouded his mind because killing them all would only heighten palace security, making it even more challenging to identify the spies from the extreme Dao 6 martial arts. The leader of the officials thought it might be his turn soon, so he felt quite anxious and kept groaning. However, nothing he said was worth the protagonist's attention. Thien Pham disregarded his pleas and tightened his grip on the man's neck until he spoke. "If you spare me, I'll lead you to the guests from Dong Shuang. Because Minister Lam values talent, expressing my willingness to serve the authority as a mediator isn't something a martial artist would do." Thien Pham loosened his grip slightly, finding this quite intriguing. "You want to serve me as a guest? Don't think I'll believe your words." The official became anxious at the protagonist's words. For him, dealing with Thien Pham was like an adventure. Indeed, he was also afraid of failing the mission. "Then I just need to propose something that will shake him," he thought, beginning to carefully consider and assert his voice as someone influential in Dong Shuang, emphasizing his power and connections. As for the position, he was at the bottom of the hierarchy, just above the lowest rank, left and right. Finally, he dared to ask if Thien Pham had received any commission from West Wan. These words puzzled Thien Pham. It was a simple question, but the celestial demon sect leader understood two things from it. First, Dong Shuang was not only fighting against each other but also against West Wan. A group of officials, including the second-rate spies identified by the elder, might be spies from Dong Shuang, not from the extreme Dao 6 martial arts. This is becoming increasingly difficult as it involves organizations within the Great Ming. If he continues, the protagonist will find it hard to fulfill the tasks, although reluctant to admit it. The Grand Eunuch insists he belongs to the Western ceremony and is to be wed to the prince, who is right in front of them. They found a formidable expert, but if we can persuade this person, who knows if the Eastern ceremony might become stronger? Please listen to me. We can be of great help to you. You don't know what they've offered, but we could offer 10 times as much. Switching sides too easily could lead to suspicion, so he deliberately rejected the offer, which seems effective. Worried about the implications, he has found a better solution because he is talented and powerful. The council could recommend him to serve under Prince Zhu Talin, the first prince of the Great Ming and the closest to the throne. Many officials support him, and among the 3 palace forces, the Eastern ceremony also obeys him. Now, reminding the conversation with the Kambai guards, they had mentioned something about the need for more guards for their divine majesty. If someone like me speaks up, even his majesty will be pleased. I also intend to report to the official conveniently. Departing from the Grand Dynasty makes him feel relieved, as he narrowly escaped death. It's astonishing how the power that almost made him invincible has now disappeared without a trace. The protagonist now has to comply with the Grand Eunuch's orders, as he doesn't want to cause chaos in the palace. Therefore, once again, the leader of the demon sect has to take on another role, this time as the internal supervisor of the Eastern Court. Meanwhile, on the left side of the royal palace is the Keenan Palace, where the palace maids and the emperor alone are allowed to enter. To its west lies a bamboo forest, with a figure wrapped in a mysterious cloak stepping in. Although it's dark because the sun has set, someone is walking along a dimly lit path. However, unknown to this person, their movements have caught someone's attention. Not only the leader of the demon sect in the palace, but also the protagonist's people are here. The Dark Shadow team, loyal to the protagonist, has infiltrated and is searching for suspicions. One of the 5 spies that the chief elder identified. Half an hour after observing that person, another figure appears. Although it's dark, the moonlight faintly illuminates, allowing the Shadow Team leader to see the surprised expression on the face of someone from the upper court secretly meeting. However, he can't hear what they're saying because they're trying to keep a distance. Suddenly, the female spy in sight disappears, making it clear what's happening below. The Shadow Team leader moves closer to see but hears a woman's voice from behind. Every cell in his body feels like needles urging him to flee before he can do anything. He's stunned by a force impacting his neck, and as he falls heavily to the ground from the strike, a gentle foot from the upper court descends upon him. She sighed with annoyance. The palace, solemn on the surface, has been infiltrated too much. The voice echoes around. It seems like it's time for the hunt. As soon as she finished speaking, millions of figures lurking deep within the bamboo forest, the pitch-black sky veiling the bright full moon with clouds, revealed more than a dozen people slowly advancing towards the eastern court. Among them was Thien Pham, with the eunuch trailing along the path, their eyes meeting the gaze of the leader of the demon sect, apparently uneasy. Everything seemed to proceed smoothly according to the account of the Grand Dynasty, yet they all remained apprehensive. Unlike the other eunuchs, Thien Pham was exhilarated, not just for returning from the dead, but also for bringing back a master, a grand courtyard with extensive influence seen even within the royal palace. Such recognition was prestigious. It proves the unshakable power of the Eastern Court, capable of accommodating 2,000 to 3,000 people. The phrase, the royal palace of the Great Ming is full of eunuchs, wasn't just a saying. It had a deeper implication. Usually, officials will halt all activities before nightfall, but the person's tasks seem unrelated to the daily workload. The Grand Dynasty inquired about the soldiers, and it was speculated that Ngu Tai Han wasn't present now. Various thoughts swirled in his head because without the officials, one couldn't enter the Eastern Court. At the very least, permission from Ngu Tai Han was required. Thien Pham shared the same mood and worry not only for himself, but also for the Grand Eunuch, who had yet to return to the palace. If possible, let's go meet Ngu Tai Han at the guest hall, he suggested. However, even the protagonist wasn't sure anymore. Now, he can only follow the instructions of one half of the authority over him. The guest hall wasn't far, and along the way, Thien Pham suddenly halted, showing caution, his gaze more serious than ever. He couldn't discern whose presence lay ahead, but it seemed formidable. In the eastern suburbs was the Eastern Court Manor, clearly indicated on a signboard not far from the manor. To the north, near the main entrance, dozens of people stood facing each other solemnly, all dressed in low-ranking official uniforms. However, each seemed to possess exceptional martial skills. Thien Pham's younger brother, feeling anxious as usual, resembled the Shadow Team leader tasked with spying, but on his journey to the palace, he had unwittingly made intimate contact with a spy. Unfortunately, before he could extract any information, he was apprehended by someone from the Eastern Court. Now, he was eager to report to his boss, but unfortunately, the Grand Eunuch had already discovered them, and they dragged him to the Eastern Court for work. The Shadow Team leader had stealthily eavesdropped on the plans of those gathered here, grasping every word, every letter. The internal strength of those around him was abnormal, and even he couldn't measure the extent of the person sitting above. their power reaching formidable heights. Dong Shuang's undercover agent, Kim Do, now wearing an eye patch, was preoccupied with other matters. This person was the spy from the extreme Saber Sect, previously reported the situation to an unfamiliar figure believed to be a low-ranking official in the Great Main. He didn't want to belittle himself, as he had done at the time in the Phap Kim Kok, but the other party seemed more agitated than he was, disregarding all the useful advice and lightly regretting Kim Do's dismissal. Kim Do didn't want to prolong the conversation either. How the extreme Saber Sect commands is none of my concern. Just follow the orders, he said. This person was the most reckless among the 6 powerful sect leaders of the extreme Saber Sect. Despite being constrained by superiors, he still held a high position in the court. How dare he touch my appearance? As he pondered this, a court official hastily spoke up. Sir, we have selected outstanding individuals, as you included. Below, the shadow team leader also noticed that demeanor. Why was he furrowing his brows absent-mindedly like that? Should I speak up, say something to wrap things up and get out of here? He thought that whatever happened, it would be for the best, so he took the initiative to make a sound and see how it went. All the others looked horrified, trying to avoid eye contact with him as if he were pointing them out. Little did he realize that someone would go berserk upon hearing the noise from above. Dong Shuang's undercover agent, Kim Do, tensed up and loudly asked who had just done that. Seeing Ho Bong appearing more concerning, he decided to play dumb, fearing that things might turn worse if he didn't. Amid the silence, Kim Do continued to shout, demanding to know who dared to make a commotion in the main hall. In a previous mission, Ho Bong had pretended to be one of Kim Do's subordinates, holding the position of Kim Do's undercover agent in the Eastern Court. After deliberately making a noise, he caused the elder sitting above to appear visibly angry, thanks to a shout from a court official that made everyone look at Ho Bong, making him sweat nervously. Damn it, what did I do wrong? Maybe I should play dumb. Otherwise, things could get even worse. Thien Pham's younger brother felt even more disappointed, overwhelmed with remorse, as Kim Do shouted angrily, apparently irritated by being threatened by one of the leaders of the extreme Saber Sect. Although he didn't understand why, he would soon find out. Just a little more. Why is he so tense? Is he going crazy or something? Despite trying to remain silent, around 30 martial artists seemed to sense that something was off. Just as Ho Bong was about to take the initiative to admit his mistake, the court official beside Kim Do understood and tried to calm him down. Please forgive me, sir. Today is my first time here as a guest, so I didn't know. Before the court officially could finish, Kim Do's face turned dark, cutting him off mid-sentence. It's indeed troublesome dealing with such an idiot. Kim Do seemed clearly frustrated. You're causing trouble while I, your undercover agent, am struggling, and you dare to make a fuss. Ho Bong pretended to apologize, bowing his head even lower. I apologize once again, sir. I have made a mistake. I hope you will be lenient and consider the actual circumstances. Ho Bong knew the situation would worsen if Kim Do intervened. His choice was the most unfavorable for both himself and the court official. He truly wanted to leave to release his frustration. However, the Eastern Court spy paid him no heed, leaping from his chair to teach Ho Bong a lesson. His speed was quite fast, but Ho Bong had anticipated this situation early on. Despite being the Grand Master for a long time, it seemed Thien Pham's younger brother still couldn't control the situation and could only evade Kim Do's attack hastily. Kim Do focused his internal strength in his hand to strike, but Ho Bong simply withdrew without resistance. If he hadn't been on high alert, he might have been lying flat on the ground by now. After missing his attack, Kim Do became even more infuriated. He argued to himself, wondering why a mere court official dared to evade his attack. This time, I'll show you that Dong Shuang isn't a place you could just come and go as you please, he vowed. As his rage escalated like an erupting volcano, he prepared to claw at Ho Bong's face with his hand. However, he didn't know whether to dodge, parry, or take the blow. In general, he couldn't afford to be hit, so Ho Bong shifted to the side, unintentionally bumping into another martial artist. It seemed like such occurrences were common, so nobody dared to intervene. The court official above only reminds newcomers to stay away, as getting involved could lead to their demise. Despite these warnings, Kim Do remained oblivious. He ruthlessly attacked those he considered the most capable, a display of his sadistic nature. Perhaps provoked and intimidated by one of the most insane individuals from the extreme Saper sect, Hobong couldn't contain himself. He wanted to release his pent-up anger, feeling powerless and desperate. Hobong's opponent's strength was overwhelming, striking him directly in the chest. Caught up in his thoughts and hesitation, Hobong's body was pushed back several feet. Luckily, there were no serious injuries as Hobong had used his internal energy to guard against the attack. It was too late to escape now, he thought, as his opponent charged fiercely, catching Kim Do off guard. Despite receiving multiple blows, Kim Do never expected his subordinate to challenge him, so he endured one of Hobong's strikes. Abandoning his escape tactic, Hobong chose to confront the remaining martial artists. They were astonished that someone so prominent among the 30 would act this way. The court official above wore a truly terrifying expression. Kim Do finally reacted, retaliating by scratching Hobong's mouth with his nails. He also uttered a few curses, no longer caring about his status. Hobong's body bent forward, and he delivered a powerful kick straight to Kim Do's cheek, causing him to stagger backward unconsciously due to the force of the blow. Despite blood spurting from his mouth and nose, maybe a few teeth added to the mix, Hobong still didn't bother to relent. Only Thien Pham had the authority to stop Hobong now, so he continued clenching his fists, tightly aiming straight for Kim Do. This time, Kim Do showed fear, attempting to shield his heavily made-up face with his sleeves, but it was just a ruse. He was on a completely different level than Hobong. His sleeve waved was a feint, and when Hobong lunged forward, Kim Do countered with a fire-blinding technique, causing him to lose concentration. Kim Do then retaliated with a counter-key attack, a move rarely seen because it requires exceptional skill to execute. Seeing the perplexed expression on Kim Do's face, Hobong charged forward again, aiming to finish him off. Suddenly, someone interfered, disrupting the attack aimed at Hobong, saving him from certain harm. Kim Do, dismissed as a powerful figure in the royal court, was surprised to see someone easily neutralize his attack. Without bothering to greet the newcomer, he retaliated fiercely, wielding dozens of swords with deadly precision. The pressure was relentless, leaving Hobong no time to catch his breath. His body contorted strangely, pushed into a corner by the onslaught of swords, targeting his vulnerabilities, leaving him unable to counterattack. He resigned himself to enduring the assault, focusing on strengthening his defenses and developing a counter-kick technique. The newcomer grasped Hobong's arm tightly, preventing him from executing his planned strike. Kim Do mocked the anonymous individual, questioned their decision to hold on to him so tightly. However, the force exerted was beyond his imagination, causing even Kim Do to jerk in surprise. After unconsciously enduring a sharp pain piercing his heart, blood spurted from his shoulder, splattering everywhere. A horrifying scene unfolded before the spectators and onlookers. The attack was powerful enough to tear his arm apart as if ripping a piece of cloth. Kim let out a scream and pleaded as he endured excruciating pain, flooding his entire body, and his arm severed. After the deed was done, both parties automatically halted, because in the end, the violence changed nothing. It was a horrific sight, but the old man endured, stepping back 10 paces, clutching his bleeding wrist tightly. With a fierce glare, he looked at the man before him, merely a skilled physician's guard. How could he possess such exceptional martial prowess? If not for the most common movements such as wrist locks, he couldn't have guessed who this savior was. Thien Pham transmitted his voice to inquire if he was all right. Suddenly, his younger brother shed tears of joy. It seemed certain it was their sect leader due to the compassionate tone and demeanor. Of course, all those speculations were accurate, as Thien Pham had sensed the situation after a few exchanges previously. The protagonist knew that this old imposter was difficult to deal with, even though Hom Quan had also been taught about utilizing internal force for techniques. However, it couldn't compare to Thien Pham's prowess. Thien Pham continued to transmit praise for his subordinate's actions, tossing the severed arm to the ground because now he had confirmed that Kim Do was the spy from Deep Dome Workshop, embedded as a mole by the Extreme Blade 6 martial sect. Feeling slightly dizzy, he changed at the distorted face, never expecting to encounter him in such circumstances. Contrary, the official only had eyes for Thien Pham. He had understood that the other party certainly wasn't a physician's guard and didn't belong to the royal court. Speaking of the sect leader of the Celestial Devil, now he sensed a certain momentum rushing towards this location. The situation was quite urgent, so the protagonist reminded his subordinate to find a hiding place or, if not, to run straight back to the Kwangmin summit. After issuing the order, the figure immediately disappeared without a word, as the man pondered whether to pursue or not. His face paled from both blood loss and shock. Sensing danger instantly, Kim Da shouted, urging his subordinates to prepare their ki and weapons, readying for battle. Initially, the martial artists thought that Team Pham wanted to set a trap for the mysterious figure with extraordinary martial arts skills. However, they soon understood the situation. However, as they sensed the martial artists of Dong Suam also preparing to draw their swords, ready for battle, each person's face showed extreme concern. The sound of something powerful treading on the ground echoed in their ears, the terrifying internal force source drawing closer with each passing moment. Not only one, but many martial artists were surrounding the main hall of Dong Xuan's residence. This force truly leaves Kai baffled. He didn't know which side they were from. If you want to find out, please like and share. Undoubtedly, the altercation between Thien Pham and Deep Dong Xuan had attracted attention, and many wanted to come and watch. Kim Do now shivered with a cold gaze. It was highly likely that he already knew who the opponent was. As the potent but indistinct internal force drew closer, the wind began to move in inexplicable directions, extinguishing the torches on the walls. With the torches extinguished, everything plunged into darkness immediately, and they could only faintly see the moonlight reflecting above. Eyes gleamed in the darkness, accompanied by dangerous voices on the castle walls. These people were neither from Dong Xuan nor from the sect of the Grand Celestial Devil, the Divine Devil Sect. In the previous episode, after rescuing his younger brother, the protagonist now had to confront a mysterious force within the imperial court. The gaze of Deep Dong Xuan showed horror before the three extremely formidable martial artists. Observing closely, they noticed that all of them were palace maids, but their aura was completely different from ordinary palace maids. However, it wasn't entirely accurate to call them martial artists. At that moment, amidst the courtyard, a figure appeared as the moon was obscured by clouds, revealing the blurry face of a palace maid dressed in a red silk robe, her hair almost entirely gray. She clasped her hands and questioned why only Deep was present, despite the fact that the chief eunuch, responsible for Dong Xuan, often traversed the imperial court. Therefore, encountering the moon spirit, the deputy chief supervisor of the upper court, was quite normal. She was about to reveal the identities of the infiltrators, but suddenly the sect leader and his subordinates disappeared. Deep Dong Xuan couldn't understand this sudden disappearance and assumed that they had likely fled when the torches went out. Although they had anticipated this possibility previously, the ghost road of Dong Xuan's guests was like a haunted temple, a term referring to a battlefield where demons were believed to be lurking. They always have sinister plots, attempting to carry out something nefarious for an indeterminate cause. Naturally, the chief eunuch at the helm also had to speak out to avoid being pushed into a difficult position. Haunted temple. What nonsense is the upper court talking about? Does she not know that this place is the territory of Dong Xuan? All of these are the rules of the Ming dynasty. Trying to approach and involve oneself in the internal affairs of places without sufficient authority must be handled by those with the proper authority. After hearing that Lin Glad did not come here as the leader of the palace maids, Deep Dong Xuan was quite surprised. I come here as one of the 3 grand eunuchs belonging to the imperial guards of the palace that you are seeking. It's quite astonishing. The deputy chief supervisor of the upper court revealed this, as the main duty of that position was mainly to punish those who caused trouble within the palace. The power of the imperial guards was formidable to the extent that even martial artists dared not to trespass. Since infiltrating the palace, Kim Do had always paid attention to forces like the West Workshop and the Physician's Guards in order to identify them. Now, he no longer needed to waste time. However, there was a small issue. His right arm had just been severed, so his strength had somewhat diminished. He needed to avoid conflict as much as possible to deal with the chief eunuch. Turning this into a victim narrative was truly immense. Gathering for Dong Xuan as the haunted temple, perhaps now he was feeling lucky about losing his arm. Take a quick look. Even our council has lost an arm. We are also victims, as I mentioned before. Since entering the palace, I have paid close attention to you. Just by looking at your eyes, it's as if you're a mouse being bitten by another mouse. According to the law, those from the Imperial Guards have the right to arrest, interrogate, and kill anyone who dares to resist. As soon as they received the order from the upper court, all the palace maids leaped from the roof to the courtyard. Some of the newly recruited martial artists were afraid, but they were not ashamed, as those people were just a bunch of weak women. The terrifying inner strength emanated from those palace maids, piercing through the well-trained subordinates of Lin Guyet. Stepping back during combat would never happen to a general wielding his sword charging towards a palace maid suffused with such formidable inner power, splitting into 5 astonishing energies. Astonishingly, amid the battle, he realized something. They weren't even focusing their inner strength on their palms. What sorcery was this happening clearly? They seemed impervious. It felt like he was swinging a wooden sword continuously at the hand of that woman. Yet it was as if he were striking a pile of iron. Perhaps conventional weapons would utterly fail against them. As he grappled with myriad thoughts, suddenly his opponent sprung back to life. Perhaps the only thing that could thwart this was related to their inner energy. Some newcomers could achieve such feats, and as anticipated, these palace maids were not formidable. Immediately, they were wounded by the opponent's body's hidden strength. No matter how tough they appear, their skill level couldn't match the invincible body. Although the person's arm was severed, they showed no signs of pain. On the contrary, they seemed even more reckless, with peculiar eyes gleaming with a golden hue. Their body, once rigid, now became more agile in dealing with the martial artists from the East. As he neared death, he struggled to wonder if these people were mad or simply impervious to pain. Now it can be seen how fervent the madness of the guardians of the electric realm is, how the heat rises within each body, and how they crazily slaughter the unfortunate martial artists without any hesitation. Let's all use our martial energy to target their leaders. Just as these words were spoken, all the palace maids realized the target that needed to be attacked was the Grand Eunuch, also a pinnacle martial artist. Dealing with each one of them, normally playful and fond of Sand's sturdy physique, was now terrifying. After dispatching a few, more reinforcements arrived, and amidst the chaos, an arm was severed without a single scream from them. It seemed as if they were moving into the formation of the electric guardians, leaping back and forth like they were chasing a mouse. Not only were their bodies tough, but the palace maids could also unleash attacks due to their lack of focus. The Grand Eunuch was struck from behind with a high-level move, and despite his cries, he couldn't comprehend how so many high-level techniques were being employed against him. Thinking so, he felt the luck turn against him as his luck took the form of a sword and his head was sent flying by a sneak attack. As mentioned before, their numbers were overwhelming, and they seemed impervious to pain or fear. Another piercing scream echoed through the royal court as the vital organs inside the Grand Eunuch's body were likely incinerated. He tried to muster his energy into his hands to strike until death, but even that seemed futile. Not only that, the palace maids adapted quickly to the rapid attacks, able to discern their own weaknesses in combat and adjust. With a final blow, the Grand Eunuch succumbed, unable to endure it any longer. Death was almost certain not only for him, but also for the officials from the Eastern Workshop, who were exhausted and continuously falling. On the other hand, Ta Deep Dong Xuan remained cooler-headed, understanding the stark difference in firepower between them and the usual Ki practitioners. He argued many words to himself, contemplating whether this horde was perhaps seeking the crippled palace maid like himself. Moving swiftly to attack Ta Deep Dong Xuan, she seemed almost fearless, her cloudy white eyes no longer able to discern much. As soon as she touched the Grand Eunuch, who had grabbed her wrist tightly, she realized their movements. Did they think depriving her of one hand would make her less of a threat? With those words, the remaining hand of the palace maid on her shoulder screamed in defiance. The strength of this Grand Eunuch was too much, it stays apart instantly. This was unexpected, as he had some ties to the extreme saber of the 6 martial schools. He discarded his right arm elsewhere and kicked the palace maid aside. All the other palace maids now paused, as if wanting to contemplate something. Ta Deep Dong Xuan understood why the opponent acted that way and immediately grabbed his arm, which began to ooze blood, and sneered with a sinister expression. "Quickly, take a look. Finally, I have found it," he said. In the assembly hall, Ta Deep Dong Xuan, one of the notorious figures among the Thai courtiers, unexpectedly discovered something. He began to smirk wickedly and looked at the severed arm of the concubine he held. He exclaimed that he had finally found it but didn't know what was truly astonishing. When he saw the golden scales on the woman's arm, he realized that those scales had protected her from the swords and life-threatening attacks. Perhaps this was the answer he was quite satisfied with, so he whistled to remind the other guards. Ta Deep Dong Shuang shouted, requesting permission to lift the ban on the use of the Dai La Divine skill immediately after the command had just ended. The martial artists, who were still in combat, responded upon hearing the devilish martial arts. The heavenly palace also felt astonished because she had never faced such a comprehensive confrontation. The upper parts of their bodies began to swell, and their muscles bulged. Perhaps those who have been following from the beginning understand the origin of this martial art. In the blink of an eye, all the bodies of Tai Deep Dong Shuang's people undergo the same change. Even though they felt no pain or injury, millions of palace maids were still astonished. Some of the newly recruited martial artists in Dongshuan were equally surprised when they testified this. The eyes of those individuals turned red, and their entire faces flushed, accompanied by dark purple veins popping on their skin. Guttural sounds began emanating from their mouths, sending shivers down the spines of both observers and spectators. Even the powerful martial artists from the Heavenly Palace couldn't help but recoil, feeling uneasy about what was unfolding. "What are they doing?" they responded, hesitating to interfere. Amidst the chaos, those wielding destructive powers, their claws swiping towards the Imperial Palace. Perhaps Lin Gaiet's voice held significant importance at this moment. Thus, reminders of the duties and orders of those women had to be issued promptly. The demeanor of Lin Gaiet's face couldn't be compared to the grimaces of those martial artists employing the Dai La Divine skill, but it was equally rigid. Regardless of the strength they possessed, upon receiving their master's command, the palace maids charged forward without hesitation, towards the two figures ahead. With nimble defensive moves, they actively closed in on the transforming martial artist. Perhaps they were unaware that this person was a demon disguised as a normal human. His large arms firmly grasped the unfortunate women, whose faces were contorted in pain as they were torn apart easily. This could be described as an extremely cruel method of killing others.